So again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you joining us on the call. Really welcome to everyone all over the world. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. Just so you know, we will share a copy of the presentation that we'll go through today, and we also have a recording that will be made available. Yeah, so you'll get a copy of this. We'll take the next 30 to about 40 minutes to go through the deck, and we'll leave lots of time for questions. So again, send those through, write them down. We'll definitely go through them. Also, please look out for a couple of questions and some polls to come through to you as we walk through the slides. We'll have them ready. It'd be great to get your feedback. So once you see the poll flash on your screen, put your answers in there, and again, post away. So jumping right into it, some of you already know us at the WFA, but for those of you who don't, just a bit of a quick introduction to us. So we're a global industry association. We have a unique grant-only perspective of the WFA. If you take a look at the screen in front of you, you'll see some instantly recognizable logos from, some of our 89 corporate brand members, the likes of Adidas, Nike, Lego, MasterCard, Coca-Cola, P&G, Unilever, go on. But you also see some logos you might not immediately know, but these represent our 57 Advertiser Association members. So not just the brands, but brand representation through national advertiser associations across 60 different countries. Together, we represent over 90% of global ad spend, and we have an on-ground presence in London, Brussels, that's our headquarters, and of course Singapore, and that's where I'm dialing in from. So go Asia. Our role is an industry accelerator. That's what we see ourselves here to do, and we're here to support our members in the pursuit of responsible, effective, and efficient marketing. Some of you also know us from our forums. These are our on-ground meetings, industry sessions, across 6 different work streams. Our CMO sessions are held in Canada and Singapore, integrated Marcom forums, as you can tell on the screen, held in quite a few places around the world. Our Insights Forum, that's new, we've just kicked off last year. Our CDO forum looks at all things digital, and it's also held in several locations across Europe and Asia. With media, that's probably the most locations we do our meetings in, and not forgetting the sourcing forum for procurement professionals. Our media forum just met most recently, and just in case you're looking at what's coming up on the calendar, our CMO forum will be meeting in June in Cannes and in Hong Kong and Singapore again later this year. So that's a little bit about us. Jumping into introduction, so you'll know at a personal level who you have on the call today. This is Ranji David again. I lead the marketing services piece for the WFA in Asia. I'm based in Singapore. That's me in the center. And together with my colleague Natalia, I say together with Natalia, it's really Natalia that runs the show. Thank you, Natalia. We'll be doing our best to make sure this runs as smoothly as possible and be taking your questions. If there are any hiccups along the way with text, just put them through in the window if you can, or drop us an email. But enough about us. Our star guest speaker for today is James Sampson, VP and GM Asia Pacific for DataXu. James, we've got you on the call.
Yep, I'm here.
Fantastic. It's always good when our speaker for the afternoon joins us. I'm just going to hand over the reins to you, and so you can help us understand today's cost-of-value consumer.
All right, thank you, Ranji. And, thanks, everybody, for joining today. I hope you're as excited as I am to go through this cool new development, I think, in the kind of media ecosystem and it's just general marketing ecosystem around, I like to call it people-based marketing. You kind of hear that term being thrown around. But really, it's as a marketer, how are you doing a better job of engaging and understanding your consumers or prospects, whichever one, as they sort of hop around different devices and channels and media formats and make kind of your life harder to reach them and engage them properly. And so this is something that's a global issue for marketers. It doesn't matter whether you're a large one or small one. Your audience is getting more fragmented, and it's kind of becoming possible now to really speak to them consistently across all these different formats. And we're going to talk about how and why and kind of some interesting kind of early case studies that have been coming out talking about the same. So I guess just a quick introduction on me. I work for a company called DataXu. DataXu is in the programmatic marketing space, and we're kind of aligned with marketers and buyers of media. We help them understand and engage their consumers better across all these different touch points. And so I'm based here in Singapore, but this whole thing and DataXu is global, so I'm happy to chat with anybody. But generally what we like to do is I guess speak at these WFA events on some of the new hot topics that are coming up that are you're probably hearing questions about in your organizations, or maybe you're reading about in the press, and we'll kind of try to come in and just chat about what they really mean and try to boil it down to something that's easy and digestible. So if I say anything too complicated or jargony, I'll try not to, but please ask a question afterwards, and we'll try to answer it along the way. So the idea today is to really just understand from your perspective what cross-device means, kind of buzz term, what the benefits are of kind of using it better in your marketing, what you should be looking for when you're looking for different technologies to help you execute this, and just some general case studies again. And I'll kind of try to highlight some things from brand marketing perspective as well as kind of performance DR marketing perspective, because there's benefits to both. So just a quick introduction. Obviously today's consumer is multi-device. I'm sure that's not surprising to anybody on the call. I kind of counted around my house. I probably, between me, my wife, and a few kids, have maybe 20 connected devices that we use daily. I'm sure that's not the norm, but that's kind of where things are headed, I'd say, for most of the world. But even around Asia, people are using multiple devices. Doesn't matter whether you're in developing country or advanced. People are generally kind of on more than one connected device throughout the day, and it's just a fact of life that's going to get worse and worse. But what that means is that from a marketer perspective, you sort of have to deal with this, and you need your marketing to get into the point of multi-device as well. And so what the biggest challenge, I think, is from a marketer perspective is, aside from kind of tracking and counting and all that other stuff that we'll talk about, it's really just like, how do you deliver a better, more consistent message to your consumer, so that if they're being exposed to one of your messages or ads, whatever you want to call it, on one device, they're sort of seeing something very similar on another device, and not seeing conflicting things like new acquisition here versus upsell there, when you know that they're a customer already. And so customers kind of expect this from their advertising and from their media consumption habits that things should be pretty consistent and seamless across these devices. And you even see kind of studies by agencies like Agile One, 3,000 people, where 70% of people kind of said they expect personalized experiences from the brands they interact with, irrespective of the devices they're engaging on. So I'm sure everybody's kind of understood this kind of issue around just getting annoying irrelevant ads. And so this cross-device marketing stuff we're talking about actually solves that quite a bit. So let's chat about it.
We've got our first poll coming up. Natalia, I think you're going to put that on the screen right now. So we'd like to know, what are your biggest challenges in multi-screen campaigns? You can only vote for one of the, so your biggest challenge, actually the biggest challenge is creative production, is analytics. Have you got it all covered? There's no vote. Let us know. We'll keep it on for the next 10 seconds, and then we'll look at the results, and you know where you stand. Okay, so it looks like it's by amount, analytics and attribution. James, any surprises there? And then it's consistent messaging. What do you think about these results?
I think that's pretty fair. I think the biggest pain point around just kind of executing cross-device is just the consistency and counting and measurement and attribution. So everybody understands that you have to engage consumers across these different touch points, but you can't really say which is the touch point that actually led to what you wanted. So no surprises there.
Okay, and back over to you, actually.
Okay. Good. So, so as a marketer, you want seamless engagement. You don't really care about the people, you don't really care about the devices as much as just kind of reaching the right audience and making sure that you're kind of giving them either the relevant product or the relevant offer or the relevant ad format, however you want to tell your story. Just kind of making sure that that's getting aligned as well as it could be. And that's the strive. And the problem is that right now kind of most of the ecosystem is kind of operating in this idea of single device execution. So I buy PC banner ads, I buy PC video ads, I buy social ads on mobile, I buy mobile display. These are all kind of like things that maybe your agencies or the tools that you're using are typically like operating in silos across different platforms and different vendors, kind of one at a time. And when you're kind of your creative teams are creating assets for campaigns, they're typically not thinking about all these different places. They're just kind of creating the rectangle ad or the native ad, but not really thinking about all the different places you can engage the consumer. And so there's kind of missed opportunities there. And really, it's like you're marketing to devices, not people. And what the big idea there is that, especially in the digital world, when you're targeting people or when you're counting people, you're actually not counting people. You're really counting kind of like an anonymous identifier associated with the browser that the ad showed up in. So those are typically called cookies, if you've heard that term before. The cookie in your browser, whether it's Chrome or Firefox or Safari on your PC or the different versions in mobile. There are these anonymous identifiers, and really that's what you're counting. And so even though, me, James, has a couple of devices on me at all times, it looks like 3 or 4 different people to you versus one. And so that's the idea of marketing to devices, not people. And the interesting thing is that you, as a marketer, you can kind of leverage a lot of like really interesting information that from each of these different devices. And so in this example here, you've got maybe on your PC, the person's visited your website. Maybe through some third-party data that they're high net worth individuals. Maybe they live in Singapore. From the phone, you might not get as much of that kind of audience information, but you might get things like, hey, what location is this person in? Have they installed my app before? What types of content do they like to kind of browse during the day? And then even on TV, you can get different things around content consumption and other demographic information. And these things are all kind of living in silos. And when you're kind of showing ads to these places, they're getting counted individually versus showing up as one person, the female on top. And so that's the way things go. And the challenge is, how do you kind of, as you start to move your marketing into this kind of like 360 view of your consumer, which from what I understand, speaking to a lot of marketers, is kind of the goal everybody has. Not just across obviously this kind of paid anonymous media environment, but also inside of your kind of CRM systems and email and social and all the kind of known identified places where you really do know the name of the person. Trying to kind of activate all that data well is tough. And trying to collect it all in one place is tough. And then even more so, trying to kind of push all that information into different execution systems where you could be sending somebody an email or showing somebody a post on the social network or showing somebody a video ad on the open internet. Like that's a challenge that most people have. But everybody wants to get to that point where they can sort of extend their CRM principles into all these different environments so that they are consistently reaching somebody with consistent messaging and consistent measurement. And so that's the framework. Sorry, it took a little longer than I expected, but quickly the kind of benefits of doing this well, and then we'll get into like the nuts and bolts of how and what's possible. Generally, here's a couple benefits if you want to do this. And we're across our client base seeing the majority of our customers kind of leveraging this technology, moving to an omni-channel execution, not really worrying about devices anymore because of all the stuff we'll talk about. but the benefits here are pretty big from your perspective. So increased reach, what does that mean? Well, typically when you're buying digital campaigns or your kind of vendors or partners that are executing these campaigns, they're typically looking for things like cookies, those anonymous IDs in browsers. And what doing this cross-device thing allows you to do is actually find those people in more places. And so you're able, instead of just looking at them in one browser, you're able to kind of find like 3 or 4 devices associated with them and serve them more impressions, et cetera. But you're also able to control the reach and frequency a lot better. So instead of thinking that you're reaching 100,000 people and actually reaching 70,000 when you deduplicate, you can take that money and invest in an incremental reach at the right frequency that you want, which we'll show some slides on. You get real attribution. So really understanding somebody saw a mobile ad, then went to my PC website and did something 24 hours later, tying all that together to know that mobile had a pretty big impact in the journey of that consumer to your product. Even just kind of journey insights, so really understanding how are people engaging with me, how are people engaging with my ad media, how are people engaging with my owned and operated properties, what path do they take to get there. Suddenly expose all of these interesting analytics that you haven't seen before to really kind of optimize and tailor messaging and formats and experiences to what you think is working. And not only what you think is working, but what you can actually measure is working. And so what you think and what actually happens might be 2 different things. And then generally just cross-device insights around what are the kind of media consumption patterns of your audiences, and do they change segment by segment, country by country, product by product. You can start to do a lot of cool benchmarking around this and get kind of more interesting insights back into like your product teams, your marketing teams, your customer experience teams. Really a lot more data flowing through here is nice. And so I'll just stop for a second on this like brand advertising idea where you obviously everybody wants to kind of optimize their reach and frequency curves. What we see when we measure this for our clients at least, and again, this is not a DataXu commercial, trying to be as generic as possible, but obviously some of this data is kind of hard to come by in the open internet of research. So here's what happens. You think that you think that you're reaching somebody maybe 5 times. So I'm just kind of sliding my mouse along here if you can see it. 5 times. That's your ideal frequency, and you've got a budget to spend, and so you think you're going to get a certain amount of reach. But in reality, especially as you deploy different channels and partners and all this stuff, you get you end up actually reaching the same person way more than you intended, and spending a lot of budget, and then kind of following this gray line, you underexpose a lot more people in kind of the tail. And so what kind of real cross-device reach and frequency controls do when you're actually executing the campaign? So this is that whole real-time programmatic idea, this real-time execution and managing it impression by impression. You can actually start to see, well, I actually reached this person 3 times on 3 different devices, but they're not eligible for this, or 5 times, they're not eligible anymore. Start spending money on more people. So you drive much more true incremental reach than you initially anticipated for the same budget. And typically what we've seen is that's kind of like reach is kind of overstated by 30 or 40% on what people do today. And so when they measure this cross-device, they think they're reaching 100,000 people. They're really reaching 60 or 70,000 people, and the frequency is much higher than they were expecting. So they can kind of take that money and reallocate it to incremental and reach more people. So that's the idea from brand marketing, is as simple as that. Doing this across different ad formats, doing it across different devices, however you want to do your marketing and tell your story. Being able to kind of control this seems to be pretty valuable. We'll get into like the direct response stuff a little bit later when we talk more about attribution and customer journeys. So we've spoken a little bit about like what's possible, what the benefits are. I wanted to kind of step down a second. So typically the next question I get is, how does this all work? Like, how are you tying these things together? Not DataXu, but the industry. How is all this stuff getting tied together, and why should I kind of believe that this is actually real? It sounds too good to be true sometimes. So let's kind of step into this, and I'll try not to get too technical here. But the idea of cross-device marketing again is can you tie all these different touch points together, which are usually anonymous. So sometimes they're kind of personally identifiable, but in most of the paid media world, you're talking about anonymous IDs, where you're trying to tie them together into one person. And you most likely don't know like the name of the person or their email address or any of that person identifiable stuff. You just kind of roll it up into one anonymous consumer profile that has all these different like touch points on it. And how you do that, this is the only math slide, but you in the back end, you kind of create something called a graph. And this is called a consumer device graph, where you're actually tying different anonymous IDs into one profile. And the way that happens is through a couple of different ways. You know, these kind of lines that you see here, those are called links. And so how do you link these two anonymous things together into one person is the question. And there's a couple ways to do it, which we'll talk about right now. The first is called deterministic linking. So these might also be kind of like industry buzz terms you've heard or heard your agency speaking about or read in the press, whatever it is. But deterministic data is the idea that this is very high probability or very high likelihood that these two things belong to the same person. Now, like, who has that type of information? Well, like Facebook, Google, Amazon, telcos, banks. You can think about all these places where people are logging into these services from different kind of digital devices. And when you log in, you're actually putting in your login. So there's not 100% because nothing's ever 100%, but pretty high likelihood that the people logging into both these devices through the same ID are the same. And so there's a lot of companies out there that provide some sort of kind of consumer service that have people logging in from different devices that actually are sitting on this type of deterministic linking data. And so this is kind of like the gold standard, which is great. Everybody wants to kind of have this, and this is why some of those media vendors I mentioned are getting so powerful, is that they do have it and they have it at scale. But it doesn't cover everything. So not everybody's kind of logging into every service, and not every kind of person who has that type of information has it on the entire population. And so what you get into the need for is this next slide, something called probabilistic data. Probabilistic data is where you're kind of using more math and algorithms to kind of analyze things like traffic patterns of digital devices on IP addresses to kind of make a best guess that these two things belong to the same person. So the example is if me, James, is kind of carrying my laptop and my phone kind of with me all the time, and I'm logging into both of them through like my corporate IP address and then my home IP address, and I'm kind of doing this pretty consistently, you can kind of make a pretty good guess, like 75+% accuracy, that these two things belong to the same person. And so that's usually what you call probabilistic linking. And so that's used, and you get a lot of scale there. We'll talk about kind of scale versus precision. The deterministic data before, that's typically called like 90 to 100% accuracy. Probabilistic is usually 75, 80% plus. And usually what these people who have some sort of probabilistic data, they usually kind of match it up against some real, what's called a truth set of data. So they do the modeling and they say, yep, we think all these things are the same. Let's actually kind of mash it up against something that's more like 100% and kind of make sure that our models are actually working well and tying these things together fairly accurately. The third piece of kind of linking is household data. So household data is where you're sort of tying all of those kind of people and profiles into a household. So like I said, I've got 20 devices at home. Those things are, some are used by my wife, some are used by me, some are used by my kids, but kind of all of those things would probably be linked into the same household. And so that's really interesting for use cases like television, which we'll talk about, where it's a non-personal device, but you want to sort of tie like people inside of a household to that non-personal device. So all that information is pretty good in the sense that you can now actually kind of use all that stuff to kind of make a better decision when you're running a campaign about should you be showing an ad to somebody or not. or to a device or not. Let's call it that. And what happens is as you start to kind of use more and more of that linking information, the link data that I mentioned, or the graph data, whatever you want to call it, kind of the more accurate you want it. So I want 100% accuracy. Oh, okay, you're going to get a little bit more scale. So instead of just targeting a PC, you might know that a PC and a phone are linked together. But if you kind of lower the accuracy a little bit, you get a lot more scale. So if there are certain kind of product categories, people are actually okay, like reaching, hey, if I'm 80% sure that these people belong to the same household or belong to the same person, that's good enough with me. And suddenly you can kind of reach more people in the target audience. For some product categories, they really want it to be one-to-one, so you can do that too. But it's sort of a trade-off that you as a marketer should sort of be able to make kind of campaign by campaign or product category by product category. But that's the idea. So deterministic is great, but even the largest kind of audience owners that I mentioned before use things like probabilistic data to help expand campaign size and campaign reach. And so there's so that's like how it's done. Obviously, it's, you could dive into the details as much as you want. Happy to do it, or have people talk to different tech teams when they want to. But generally, there's kind of different ways that you can access this data in the marketplace as a marketer. And so there's pros and cons of each one. But kind of the biggest ways that I see out there right now are kind of vendors that are creating these graphs. So there's third-party vendors out there that are creating these graphs, and they're kind of going and they do deals with like publishers and e-commerce providers and all these people that might have all that login information. And they're kind of packaging it up and selling it. And so that's this first column around kind of cross-devices third-party data. Through some of the platforms that your agency might be using, you can sort of select these third-party graph providers and say, I want to target ads using this graph, and therefore it'll help you kind of expand your audiences that way. Generally it's a limited scale, and you have to kind of choose like one versus the other. But that's kind of a popular way to do it. Another popular way to do it is through walled gardens. So you mentioned like Facebook and Google and Amazon and maybe Baidu and Alibaba on this side of the world. But generally, these guys own a ton of their own data that's kind of tying all these different devices together. And so when you're kind of using them, they'll also enable you to kind of target cross-device. Kind of the same challenges that you typically deal with when working with them around kind of lack of transparency and optionality and kind of understanding like real insights about about one-to-one consumers. That still applies here. So you're not going to get that, but you will get sort of ease of use, I would say. And then the kind of third way is this is DataXu's option, but seems to be kind of resonating well. So I thought I'd include it at least. But a graph of graphs. So as more and more of these third-party providers aggregate all of these links together, and you take like deterministic data and probabilistic data, you mash it all up into kind of one graph in one identity management system, and then you can sort of you get the benefits of all of those things tied together. So one provider knows two things are connected, another one knows another two things are connected, but when you have all those together, you know that three things are connected together. And so this is a bit more flexible and kind of gets you the most scale with the most amount of optionality when you're running campaigns. But kind of three different ways to buy, and kind of the vendors and tool sets that you use kind of dictate which ones you're gonna use. So, by the way, I'm from Boston, which I don't think I ever mentioned. Far enough away to not get the bad accent. But unfortunately, I got stuck with the monotone voice here. So hopefully, I'm not boring anybody. I don't see any questions yet, but if anybody has any, happy to answer along the way. We probably have a few more slides, which we'll start to talk about things like attribution and case studies. So cross-device attribution, like what does this mean? Well, obviously everybody knows that you're probably having to engage people multiple times before you get them to do what you want them to do, whether that's configure a car online, sign up for a credit card, walk into a store and buy something off the shelf. You've sort of got to influence them multiple times. And you, as a marketer, you're sort of trying to make sense of, like, should I have reached them here? Should I have reached them there? Should I have reached them with this ad format or this message? All these different things that can kind of go into somebody actually doing what you want them to do. You're trying to kind of gain visibility and insights into. And I think this technology that links all these things together is really pushing things forward for marketers by leaps and bounds over what they've been able to do for the last, like, 10 or 20 years in digital. And so this is the exciting stuff, at least from my perspective. You know, my background before DataXu was working with mobile advertising kind of pretty early on, and then kind of ending up getting acquired by Nokia and kind of doing time there. But it's mobile advertising. Everybody, I don't think anybody's going to argue that more and more people are just sort of mobile first around the world, but marketers are not. And my theory is that a big challenge there is they can't really measure things that well inside of mobile devices. And so somebody might click on an ad, but you don't really know if they went to your website or mobile app. Maybe people clicked, maybe they didn't. Maybe the connection timed out on their phone. Like whatever it is, like you can't really measure it apples to apples with what's happening with the rest of your digital media, especially on the PC side. But now, excuse me, now that you can actually tie these things together, you can kind of understand things like mobile's influence and path to purchase or path to whatever you want. Excuse me. And so here, this is a e-commerce provider. So I know e-commerce is not like the biggest WFA member category, but something that probably is anybody who's trying to get people to kind of do something on their website, whether it's download a lead gen or download a white paper or fill in a lead gen form or whatever it could be. I think this is applicable. And so what we saw is that when you're serving, we served an ad here to people on the phone. This was trying to get people to buy some boots, I think, whatever Zappos was before they got acquired by Amazon. But we actually served it to them on mobile devices, like 100% mobile devices was where the ads went. But when we measured actually where people did the purchase or did the intended action of the people that actually converted for the campaign, 70% of the people actually converted on the desktop, and only 30% kind of converted in the place where the ad was run. And so what did that actually mean? Well, if I was a marketer and I couldn't really tie these things together, I'd say, oh man, you know, these mobile ads did not really work very well. They only generated, I don't know, three conversions for whatever the number of conversions were, but not that great. And actually, I just randomly got a bunch of unattributed actions to my website. So maybe I'm not going to do mobile anymore. But what you see is actually, yeah, mobile influences people going. They just want to do it in a better environment, which is easier to use or based on kind of the connection speed is a better experience or the category. But like suddenly you have more confidence as a marketer to actually spend more in mobile because you know it's actually driving your results. It's just happening in a different environment, which is kind of the way people move naturally across what they do on these digital devices anyways. The cool thing is this is now so programmatic marketing has sort of evolved. So for those who don't know much about it, programmatic marketing allows marketers to buy their advertisements in one real time, you know, blah, 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 all that stuff, right place, right time, etc. But it's actually, it's evolved from just being sort of PC banner ads to mobile devices, tablet devices, video formats, audio formats, native formats. And now you're seeing this acceleration into TVs. So as TVs become IP enabled, so through the actual TV, if you buy like a smart TV, maybe through an Apple or a Roku device that you attach to your TV, maybe through the set-top boxes that are getting IPs. These are now becoming addressable devices and addressable ad formats to these programmatic marketing systems. And so you've got all of these types of ad formats and devices flowing through one platform, and suddenly you can kind of connect the dots on all these different touch points a lot better. And so TV, from a thing, you don't really have that much measurement on what happens on TV. But now, through all this cross-device linking, remember, like, the household is kind of connected to the different devices inside of it. Suddenly you can say somebody saw an ad on their TV and then went to the website and did something from that household, which is kind of groundbreaking. It sounds simple, but like most TV marketers don't really get that very well. They have to do all these kind of random studies to kind of evaluate it. Now you can actually tie it one-to-one. And even better, like if somebody goes to your website and maybe you want to put them into a remarketing pool, or you know that they're browsing for a certain type of product, next time you see somebody from that household on the TV, you can show them an ad. So you can retarget from digital devices to the TV and vice versa. And so you're really starting to see a lot of measurement and kind of analytics that you didn't have in the TV space coming up as these things get more enabled. And so think of that as especially, so TV obviously I know is a big place where WFA members kind of spend money. This is becoming a lot more measurable and efficient. And so here's one thing to be considerate of. All of this data floating around these systems, typically non-PII or non-person identifiable. So that's cool. But what happens is that different countries or different organizations have different policies on what's considered PII and not. So in certain parts of Europe, IP addresses are considered PII. So when you basically want to kind of make sure that that the tools that you're using are not kind of violating this stuff, but when you actually do it right, you can kind of connect all of these different touch points together into one consumer profile and use that data across. So if you know somebody's in the high net worth individual segment from their PC cookie, you can target that TV screen in their house, and vice versa. So kind of there's one side of this is just about programmatic marketing and kind of media buying. Another part is this cross-device data management and identity management, which you have to be kind of wary of depending on how you want to do it and how tolerant your company or organization is to tying some of this stuff together.
What do you think? Are you doing a good job engaging our various audiences with consistent messaging across digital touchpoints? So we'd like to know this. What do you think? Yes, no, not sure. I'm kind of wondering about that. Keep sending your responses through. Yes, doing a good job. No, not sure. I'm wondering if not sure means, well, we don't have the measures in place to really know if we're doing a good job. Let's see, we're going to close the polls in about 5 seconds, or 2 maybe. All right, well, we've got about 40% not sure, 33% quite modestly saying, no, we're not doing a good job. And then actually 23% saying, yes. James, what do you think about this result?
I'd love to hear the yeses and kind of give everybody ideas of what they're doing well. But so I would say
if you want to know,
no. We can save that for later, maybe if there's some time at the end. But not sure is probably a pretty common answer. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we've got some case studies that hopefully you can flesh out good examples.
Yeah. Let me speed this up. So some kind of questions that you probably want to ask of your partners that are doing this. If you want to kind of engage in this activity, which I would argue kind of most people are going to by default as time progresses, whether it's kind of immediately this year or next year, but things will progress to this. This is the default way of working in my mind, and not just because I sort of work in this industry, but it just makes sense. So what type of tracking identifiers are used to reach consumers? So understanding, are you using cookies, are you using device IDs, are you using IP addresses, are you using something based on login information, et cetera, et cetera. What do consumers know, and how much control do they have over their use of their own data? Again, this is something that might, depending on the market you're kind of operating in, might be more important than others, especially Europe, which I know there's a good group of people on the phone from. But sort of like, are they opting into this? Do you need to make them opt in? Does your company need to make them opt in? Stuff like that to check out. And then even from a data usage and control perspective, it's like, are you providing consumers the ability to opt out if they don't want to be in it, et cetera, et cetera. And so these are things that, you know, it's kind of like a gray line almost as new things come out, regulation comes later. There's a lot of like industry best practices and self-regulation that happens to make sure that people aren't, you know, worried about like data loss or data theft or their kind of consumer tracking. So the industry does a lot here to make sure that this is, you know, as compliant as possible from just kind of a user mentality perspective as well as regulation perspective. But then some regulatory bodies kind of come down as time progresses. So just be aware of all that stuff. And then I guess a few case studies. So these are pretty simple. Nothing mind earth-shattering here, but I think that what this does is when you start to kind of use this and measure it well, it starts to help you make much better decisions as a marketer and much more rational decisions versus some of the guesswork that you have to do on what's working and what's not. And so for those that don't know, House of Blues, they are like a ticketing well, kind of music venues and different venues you can buy tickets to see different entertainment shows at, however you want to call that. But they sell a lot of different tickets to a lot of different types of events, and they know that, hey, the majority of my consumers are kind of mobile enabled, and so what they did was kind of use OneView to kind of see, independent of where I'm running my ads, like where are the conversions happening. And what they found was that they were able to measure 60% more conversions happening by using, OneView is DataXu's product name for cross-device. So sorry for the DataXu stuff, but again, hard to find other people's. So when they use kind of cross-device attribution, they're able to measure 60% more conversions than before. And what they were also able to do with the same marketing budget was realize, oh, I should be spending more money on mobile than I am, because it seems like that's where people are really engaging from. They just don't happen to be buying tickets from their mobile device. And so they kind of just doubled the allocation from 15% to 30%, not increasing the budget at all, and saw ticket sales and revenue associated rise by 60%. So quick decision making, but they didn't have the confidence to do it before. If you have some of your organizations have anything to do with mobile apps and trying to get people to use and engage you with apps, I know a lot of like quick serve restaurants are doing this now. A lot of loyalty programs for all different marketers. You want to get people to kind of use these things. You can start to ingest all the data coming from your website information, from your mobile apps, trying to segment people into the right buckets. So this is more of like a programmatic thing around audience segmentation. But then actually reaching those people right across the different touch points and measuring like what people do. And what you end up seeing is that cost per acquisition come down because you're using your data in a smarter way and activating it across these different touch points in a smarter way and aligning the messages correctly. So if you know somebody should be getting a new user ad versus an existing user ad, you give them the right one wherever they are, and then kind of optimizing it. But okay, so that's it. And you know, we spoke about the brand advertising one around increasing your reach and lowering your frequency to your desired levels. So generally, I'm seeing all different types of marketers with different marketing objectives finding benefit from using this. And as soon as they start doing it once or twice, they kind of move to just an always-on mentality around planning and buying and measurement that's different from what they were doing before in these kind of single-channel mindsets and single-channel technologies. So I guess with that, I'll stop talking for a little bit, and we can move on to questions.
Okay, thanks, James. Couple of questions, well, actually more than a couple of questions. Let's jump into, walled gardens. We talked about that in terms of the different ways of buying. One of our members has a question. They're a little bit wary of using walled gardens because of the single sign-on deterministic approach. Can you mention the data vendors who offer deterministic? Is it, are you able to talk about that?
Sure. So the question is, walled gardens are something that somebody wants to shy away from for a variety of reasons. What other options are there? Well, I know, yeah, you don't want to give them 8 out of 10 cents, I guess. But it's yeah, I say generally there's those guys are good sources of this type of information for sure. Like right now, it's still an early market. There's kind of other data providers coming out that are you might not know the names of these guys, but these are kind of other ad tech companies or martech companies. People like TapAd, Drawbridge, AdBrain, Crosswise. These are some of those third-party providers that are going out and aggregating this link information. So that's one source. I would say what I'm personally seeing, especially in the region and the world, to be honest, is like other types of companies that own all these audiences, kind of figuring that that's actually an interesting asset for them to use. So you'd think people like different telcos, different pay TV providers, other people who might sell media, like giant e-commerce providers. They're all starting to kind of offer cross-device and people-based marketing offerings. I guess what we would advocate is you kind of want something that's flexible that can kind of ingest your own data if you might have it, as well as use third-party data and mix and match it together. But you sort of want something independent versus tied to the media seller.
Okay, and you talked about, what you just mentioned briefly what you're seeing out here. We've got a question specifically about APAC. What is the state of maturity and the opportunity for TV in Asia Pacific? What are you seeing across TV within the Asia Pac region?
Okay, so TV is kind of like a pretty generic I guess group, but I guess if you're kind of looking at it from like a programmatic TV perspective, programmatic TV is kind of another umbrella term where you kind of have different set-top box owners, so all the different TV providers, basically enabling you to buy kind of household level data, household level kind of targeting inside of a set-top box. That's usually that's called addressable TV, and then you also have things like connected TV, which are those different TVs or Roku devices or these add-on boxes that sort of make the TV screen more interactive. And I guess what I'm personally seeing is you're seeing a lot of these like OTT services pop up, where people are taking the traditional TV content and making it available to users everywhere. So same thing we're talking about marketers, like having to reach people everywhere. Well, the TV content providers and pay TV operators are having to do the same thing with their content because people are kind of shifting away from watching like linear TV. I would say not as fast as in other parts of the world. So Southeast Asia especially is still a pretty dominated market by linear TV. But I was just at a conference like two weeks ago where every pay TV provider, every content provider is aggressively shifting to offer everything they do in an OTT environment because they know the writing's on the wall. I'd say like right now you can buy a lot of programmatic TV. Not a lot, but it's out there. I'd say in a year from now you're going to see the availability of inventory kind of skyrocket as more of these OTT services come out and kind of consumers continue to shift.
Okay. Got a question on attribution. How much of the attribution can be done live? How complicated is that? What are the benefits of doing that live? How do you see brands use this and use it to success?
Okay, so attribution happens real time. It's kind of a nice thing. So you don't have to wait till like the campaign is over to kind of see this stuff. So you're kind of seeing it as it flows in, and as the systems that you're using are tying these dots together. There's third-party attribution systems that might be a little slower, and then there's attribution systems tied to the execution platforms or data management platforms that are probably working a little faster. But generally, you should be able to kind of make changes in the middle of a campaign if you want to, or if the system you're using is smart enough, it'll make the changes for you. So our system, for instance, like understands all these different touch points and attributions and kind of shifts budget automatically based on what's working in the middle of a campaign. So it's getting to that point where, like, as a marketer, you're almost like you don't need to be as hands-on as you want to kind of make sure you're taking advantage of the stuff. And there's so much information flowing through that it's kind of hard to. So systems are good for that, where they're just shifted from one to the other because I see that working for this campaign.
Mm-hmm. That we've got a little bit of a last question. I think we have time for one last one about the walled gardens we talked about. That offer targeting inside the environment, but because they just won't let data leave. And if you answer this, we understand that. Is it worth brands continuing to do that given the wealth of targeting options? Or kind of say, explore different solutions. What are the options, or how can an advertiser best manage the current environment we have?
So I think this is kind of interesting. Obviously, you need to put money into walled gardens for kind of obvious reasons. A good amount of the reach is there. You like the way you buy there, whatever it is. What I guess independent companies like us are trying to do around that is say, okay, we get it. There's going to be these different environments that as a marketer you're going to have to spend money in, and they're not really, you're sort of at the will of those companies as far as how you buy it. And so most marketers want to kind of buy it the same way they buy everything else, but that's not the case right now. You're going to have to buy it on their terms. What is interesting, though, is that a lot of these guys are starting to let you actually push your audiences into their systems. So even though you can't buy as easily as through like programmatic systems, you can push the data that you're kind of getting from these audiences, especially when you do this cross-device stuff. You can push those audiences into Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever, and you can use those audiences for targeting messaging. So let's say you're kind of hey, this specific audience that I'm kind of targeting outside of those walled gardens is getting this message or eligible for this campaign or whatever it is. You can make sure that while they're inside of those walled gardens, they're getting the same messaging. So at least you can bring some consistency there and kind of activate your data everywhere, even though you can't necessarily buy it the same way through the same buying modes. So we're seeing like that becoming like an interesting conversation amongst everybody who's not like Google and Facebook, because they want to kind of do things consistently, but they can't, and they can't measure it the same way. But at least if they can kind of reach their audiences consistently, they're finding that to be valuable.
Okay. So we could talk about this all afternoon. We have to wrap up. So we're at the end of the day. So thank you so much for that, James, and thank you everyone for asking your questions. Again, we will be sending the deck out. So if you have any questions that we didn't get to answer today, if you have questions you'd rather ask us in private, send them to us, and we'll get them answered for you. In the meantime, thank you, everyone. Massive thanks to James, and have a really good afternoon, rest of the day, wherever you are in the world, and look forward to talking to everyone in the next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And yeah, I guess if there's any questions we didn't answer, send them to Ranji and we can try to answer them for you.
Absolutely. And if you happen to be in the various markets that we have events coming up next, don't miss our CMO Forum. That will be at Cannes on the 21st and 22nd of June. We'll be in Miami on the 23rd of May, and also in Shanghai from the 11th to 12th of July. So see you all online or online for webinars. And thanks again to James and DataXu. Bye, everyone.
Bye.